Hello and welcome to Microfile, which gives you a chance to see again some of the best items from the Micro Live series. This week we're looking at graphics, the ability of a computer to draw. This software uses the by now familiar mouse to let you draw and paint in 4 colours. You can move the mouse around and let's say, where's the arrow gun? Ah, there it is at the bottom. Say pick up a spray gun here just by pressing a button. Where is it? There. And now I can spray either using a plain colour like this down here or perhaps one of these intricate patterns here. That one will do. And now I can just vandalise the picture to my heart's content. As you can see, I can build up quite complex designs very simply. A black and white version of this software is incorporated into a new publishing package called AMX PageMaker. It means you can mix words and pictures to create your own newsletters, as Mac demonstrated in one of our recent programs.
For home publishing, you really need more than just a word processor. You need to be able to generate documents containing both text and illustrations. And you need the text to be available in a wide variety of fonts and sizes. Well, this package, PageMaker, can do all those things. It runs on a BBC Micro, and you also need a dot matrix printer to print things out. Well, you don't really need a mouse, but it makes it a lot easier. And these are the control buttons here that I shall be using to do almost everything in composing my little newsletter. Well, it lets you compose pages with many of the features you'd expect from a real newspaper. It's got headlines, it's got columns, it's got pictures and diagrams and so on, and it's all very nicely laid out. It's rather clever, I think. Well, I'm in the process of writing our MicroLive program notes, and you can see I've got half a page here, and that's what's displayed on the screen. I can scroll it up and see the bottom half down here eventually as I go along and prepare things. Well, I'm just going to write a new column over here, and I position the cursor where I want to start typing, and just hit one of the keys on the mouse like that, and I can type Home Publishing. There. Now, I don't want to carry on at that size of font, it's rather too large, so I'm going to change the font size by altering it like this, and I just take it back to a smaller font size. Now, the next thing I have to do is to really define where I'm going to actually put my new piece of text. Well, I want it clearly in this area under Home Publishing. So I select this icon there and go to Define, which enables me to define the area. I place the crosswires there. And all the time, I'm just using the mouse. It's very straightforward. And there. So I've now defined exactly where I want my text. Well, I could type into this area, of course, but instead of doing that, what I'm going to do, I've already prepared an article using a word processing package. And I'm going to extract from that word processing package and write it in that space. This helps you, for example, if someone else has actually sent you an article that you want to use on his Micro. So the next thing I'm going to do is to go in there and read a file. And it's asking which drive. It's on drive 0. And the word processing package I've used is called View. And it's asking me the file name. So I've got to change the disk here. And this is the disk that I've already prepared using View. Stick it in there. And the file name is Home. Now what it's asking me to do is to position the cursor where I want this to be printed. And I want it just in there. And away it goes. Now, I've used all the facilities of the word processing package to produce this, but this package is actually spacing it out and opening up the words so I don't get split words at the end of a line, and it fits perfectly into the little area that I've actually allocated to do it. Right, it's rather nice, and that's it completed. Now, the next thing I might want to do, there's an article on page 3 on the Sinclair spectrum, so what I'm going to do is to actually try and draw a Sinclair spectrum in the area that I've allocated for it here. And to do that, I select this icon here, which is a kind of paint pot. And I go into Shapes, and of course the shape of a Sinclair spectrum is a box. And quite rapidly, I can try and draw myself a Sinclair spectrum. Well, that's one box, and of course it's got keys on it. And so I start off doing the keys like this, and I can repeat them. There we go. Repeat them like that, and so on and so forth, and get some sort of replication of a Sinclair spectrum. Now, I might want to actually colour that in or paint it, so I go to the paint icon up here and take it down here, and bingo, I've got something black, and it roughly looks like a Sinclair spectrum. Well, it doesn't look very good to me. It's rather pathetic. But what we'd like to do now is to load in a real picture of a Sinclair spectrum. Lesley.
Right, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to use this device from Watford Electronics. It's called a digitizer. It costs £95 and it lets you grab frames of video into your micro. Now, I've got the digitizer connected to an ordinary home video recorder, and you can see the television there is tuned to BBC One. Who have we got on? The Terry Wogan Show. His guest is Norman Tebbit. I'm sure neither of them will mind helping us with this demonstration. Right, now what happens is once every couple of seconds or so, the digitizer scans the incoming pictures, sending the video information to the computer's memory, and you can actually see that happening on the computer monitor. Now, seriously, you must say at this moment, if you're going to publish pictures taken off the television, you do need copyright clearance from the broadcasting company. But, of course, you don't have to use broadcast pictures at all. You can also use a home video camera, like this one here, and you can grab pictures of anything, your husband, your granny, or your dog. But what Max said he wanted was a picture of the spectrum. So that's what he's going to get. I shall select camera on the video, and as soon as I've got a picture of the spectrum up on the computer monitor, it means that that's safely in the memory, so I should be able to save that picture onto disk. There it goes. Yep. And, of course, once I've got it on disk, I can do anything I like with it. Mac, I believe you wanted this for your micro-live publication?
Thank you very much.
Hold
Here
the
we go.
front page.
Let's try it. Well, I've already scrolled up, as you can see, the top part of the page, and I've got to, by using this arrow here, I just scroll it up a little bit more to give me the whole of the bottom half of my sheet. And there it is. Now, what I've got to is to, of course, read in the disc that Lesley has just given me. And I'm going to read it out onto the screen, insert the disc, and press execute. Here we go. Drive 0. Load. And it's asked me the file name. Now, this file name this time is Spectrum. It looks an odd spelling, but that's the name we've given to the file. And here's hoping, Lesley, that you got it. It is, perfectly. And here it is beginning to come out. Now, it's a very hard test for the digitizer, is this, because the spectrum is black with black keys with this very fine white lettering on it. And you'll notice that it's also negative. In other words, it's like a negative film you've got processed in. The black is white and the white is black. But once it's in the machine, we can do all sorts of things. We can turn it round, left to right. We can flip it over, top to bottom. We can increase its size to double the size. We can shrink it down to half the size, to position it in any particular position we want in our newspaper. And we can also actually touch it up by using the paintbrush and clear out some of the mess that we've got. Well, there it is. It's read in. Now, let's take the icon down to there, and we can invert it, and bang, that's our picture of the spectrum. Well, it doesn't look all that brilliant, so perhaps what we should do is just do a little bit of a touch-up. And I can do that by, again, selecting the paint pot. I want a pattern. The pattern I'm going to select is white, because I'm going to clear up some of those terrible dots and things. And I'm going to use the spray to do that. And start, and there we go. I'll start to clear off all this rubbish around here. And oops, I've carved out a bit of this wonderful spectrum. And so it goes on, and that's really quite nice. Well, the PageMaker costs about £50. And if you want the mouse, that's another £40. You've been able to do this kind of thing for some time on more expensive equipment, but now that many home micros have high-resolution graphics and more memory, this kind of program should be soon available for a wider range of machines.
Of course, clever though it is, that sort of software is still fairly basic, but it is something within the grasp of anyone with a home micro. However, if you've got a much bigger computer and some clever homegrown software, the effects can be staggering.
Nature is noisy, not only to the ears, but to the eyes. Walk through a forest, you'll see a million different kinds of trees and plants, and each one of them is a little different from all the rest. But beneath this amazing complexity, mathematicians are beginning to observe some simple conceptual structures. At first glance, this looks pretty complicated. But when you look again, you learn that its complexity derives from the repetition of a simple motif. It branches in several directions, branches again in several directions with pretty much the same angles, and again and again. Each small section is just a repetition of the previous one, but on a smaller scale. The mathematical term for this concept is self-similarity, and it's a structure that many things in nature display, from blades of grass to clouds in the sky. When computer graphics people talk about simulating reality, you hear the word fractals a lot. What's a fractal?
Well, I like to take an informal approach to fractals. Fractal for me is more of an adjective than a noun. A fractal object is one that exhibits self-similarity. Prime example is something like a fern. If you look at a small piece of a fern, its geometry looks very similar to the entire fern. That's a very straightforward example, exact similarity. When you go to other natural objects like trees, you start to see some deviations from that pattern. Leaves will be forming, but the idea of a branching where the geometry is similar at the tip as on the entire tree, that's the notion of fractal for me. As I said, it's more of an adjective. But as an overall quality, one notices this property in trees and in other forms of nature, such as clouds, waves, mountains. As you look closer and closer at an object, you see more and more detail. In a way, fractals is an approach to looking at natural objects like trees. In the past, mathematicians have considered surfaces and objects as very smooth shapes. They've ignored the fine detail. They've ignored roughness everywhere. This is a system designed for editing fractal trees. The system stores a representation of the tree, and notice on this particular tree is very geometric, straightforward. It doesn't look like a real tree, but it suggests the branching structure of a tree. There's a main stem, and from the main stem, 2 branches come out. And at each branch point, 2 new branches are coming out. The angle is the same everywhere, the number of branches are the same, strictly self-similar. This set of sliders allows us to vary the parameters of the branching. For example, we can change the branching angle, and by lowering the branching angle, all the branches change at once.
That's looking much more leaf-like, but it's still very regular.
Right. What we can do is we can change some more parameters, in particular the angle, the ratio between the stem and the side branches, to get a new set of shapes. And in this way, we can actually simulate a growth process. Here is a stem, a blade of grass, and as it matures, the branches come out and grow. Still very regular. Every branch is exactly like every other branch.
And that looks more natural, but it's still awfully precise because everything's the same length.
Right. Well, we've given the computer 30 or so numbers upon which to base the geometry, but it can randomly vary those numbers. By rolling the dice, the computer chooses new numbers at every branch point, so that now we're changing the length of the branches. So some of the branches are longer than others, randomly chosen by the computer. This creates a more organic feel to the picture. It simulates randomness in nature. In fact, it's starting to look a little bit like the shapes we saw in the garden earlier. The numbers are analogous to the gene in the plant. A plant has only a small amount of DNA, a small amount of genetic information, by which it has to describe its entire structure. It has to be very economical, and as a result, it repeats the same structure at all scales. This is one of the reasons why nature is so self-similar. In the computer, we want to do the same thing. We only have a few numbers. We can't set every branch. We just need to set the basic, simple description. The computer takes over for us and creates the complexity based on a simple structure. There's a sort of a data economy here, which mimics the logic of genetic economy in nature. I definitely look at nature a lot, and the evolution of this program started out with only a few parameters. And I would go out into nature and see things that would happen in nature that my program could not yet describe. so I needed to add new parameters. Initially, there was no helical twist. Everything was in a plane. I added a new geometric description. It takes a year to do a program like this because you have to see the trees in all its facets. You have to see the blossoms in the spring, the leaves in the summer, the colors in the fall, and the bare structure of the tree, showing its full branching in the winter. In addition to modifying the branching structure, we can control the actual geometry of the stem itself. A lot of plants, ferns, will, when they grow, actually be curled up and open up this way. And once we curl up the stem into a little watch spring, we can actually pull the watch spring perpendicular to the plane of the spring.
Just like grabbing it and stretching it out like that.
It certainly will break your watch, but for many plants, it allows a vine, for example, to grow around another plant. By adding randomness, you can get more gnarly-looking trees like a cherry tree. With one set of numbers, we can get a great variety of trees with the same set of numbers.
Well, you've got the same basic structure for every single tree, but you just sort of roll the dice again, get a different set of numbers in it. But within limits?
We set how much randomness we want. Randomness is a parameter in itself. And in a way, we can perform an aesthetic selection. In nature, there's randomness, and natural selection chooses what species survive. On the system, we can spin the dice and make an aesthetic selection. This one looks right, so we will breed that tree.
Keep
Those
that
parameters are good. Save that one. The ones that don't look good, we throw out. In a way, I use this tool as a means of exploring geometry. I think you'll find a new way of doing science as a result of computer graphics. In the past, scientists have done experiments by writing a formula, setting up an experiment, and if the dial points to the right number, that proves the theory. Now people have pictures to prove their theory. If you set your parameters and the picture you come up with looks like the real thing, that shows that you understood the problem a little better. You've captured the essence of its structure.
Well, those trees were grown on DEC mini-computers, but you can grow your own on a micro. Here's a short fractal program using the BBC B. You can alter all the values just as they did on the film. Now, this one, for example, is asking how many levels of branching would you like? Well, I'll say 5 and set it going. This particular pattern will take about half a minute or so, but if you can spare half an hour, you could grow something more complicated. Here are some that we made earlier today. We've speeded up the process so you can see what's happening. You can choose the angle between the branches, a number of branches and so on. You can even choose the ratio of the branch to the side stem. And here's a slightly simpler one. Obviously, the more complex take longer to draw. You can also choose between random elements, as these have, and a symmetrical pattern like this simple one here.
We've adopted that program from one in this book, The Art of Microcomputer Graphics. The code's available with the program notes and details in the Radio Times, and we're hoping to have a Spectrum version. How about that?
Brilliant. But perhaps the most stunning graphics we saw on MicroLive were those entered for the Computer Animation Film Festival Awards, held at Wembley in October '85.
Called Tom's Gears, that mind-bending piece was the winner in the Fine Arts category at last night's Computer Animation Film Festival. One of the judges was from Middlesex Polytechnic. He was John Vince, and John is with me now in the studio. Welcome, John. I think we should get straight on and look at some of the award winners. And there's absolutely nothing partisan about showing British this evening because we did so well. So let's start with the winner in the pop promo section. This is going to be Dire Straits, and it comes from a British company called Rush's Post-Production.
Yes, this one's very good. We're just seeing what is called a real-time image floating through the screen there. But
was that the little sort of cartoony
little puppet,
figures, if I dare call them that?
That was done on a Bosch FGS system.
Why real-time? What does that expression imply?
It speeds up the process of getting the final animation. Here we're just seeing some paintbox images superimposed on live action.
So using a real-time system, you can actually capture images as they're happening?
Yes.
Providing they're simple enough, I
If they're
suppose.
simple and normally in wireframe.
Yes.
Some systems, like the Bosch, can do the colouring as well in real time.
Those were actually rather angular, I thought.
Yes, just to keep the model simple and keep the speed up.
Right, OK. Right, let's move on to another category, a slightly different category this time. Winner of the commercial category. This is again from Britain. It's Robinson Lambinerns and Electronic Arts Get Smarties. Very, very jolly, this
Yes,
is.
now when I first saw this, I just didn't believe, well, I couldn't understand how it was achieved, but it is a computer, beautiful modelling, beautiful animation. I mean, look at that model there.
Nothing but a computer could actually create these images.
No, it would take a lifetime, it seemed, to do that, yes.
That in itself is its own justification, isn't it? Well, I think we'll move on now and see something slightly different. In fact, this wasn't an award winner, but a favourite of yours, I know, and it did vie for first place for the Supreme Award. This comes from Moving Picture Company. It's called Picture Gallery.
Yes, this one's got some beautiful effects, some video effects, Quantel Mirage, Quantel Paintbox, and the Bosch again. But one of the outstanding features of the animation is the use of motion control. But here we are inside the model, and the computer is controlling that movement. And all of these other images are superimposed afterwards.
And where do those images come from? Do they come out?
Well, the cubes, you see the cube
Yes.
here, that is a Bosch image, and that could be shown in real time.
That is absolutely, it is tremendous, especially
yeah.
as you start to explain it.
Yes, fantastic.
Do you
yeah.
think that computer-assisted visuals will eventually replace the traditional way that animators work altogether?
I don't think so, and I wouldn't want to see it either, no.
So do you think that there is a place for both?
They are going to coexist for a long time, yes.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. I'm sure there are many traditionalists who hope so too, because they do say, traditional illustrators, that computer-generated images might be very clever, but they lack sensitivity and they lack personal expression, I think you'd call it. But frankly, this year's overall winner of the competition defies that criticism. From Canada, it's a little piece called Tony DePeltry. Let's have a look at that.
Yes, now, this piece is really outstanding, and I suppose the purists would say that this is pure computer graphics. Everything is drawn by the computer. Fantastic modelling. We saw the model of the shoe just then. Now, that is not a real shoe, but a computer-generated shoe.
Now, what exactly do you mean by that? I mean, that's a staggering statement to make.
Someone has to feed in the dimensions of the shoe, in that someone has had to feed in the dimensions of this model that we're seeing now. Every aspect of that model has to be fed in numerically.
So, you're saying that the model itself doesn't actually exist? There isn't a puppet-type figure who's being moved about?
Well, there would have been a shoe in the first place, and there would have been a model of the head in the first place,
Yes.
but that is digitised and turned into a system of triangles and polygons, and afterwards that model can be thrown away. It's the numbers that remain that are animated.
So you're actually talking about turning numbers, the measurements between one little point and another. You tell the computer that, and the computer can then judge for itself how all those numbers move about.
Under the control of a program, yes.
Absolutely. So
Yes.
therefore, that makes the lights and the shadows from the figures, none of those are real
Yes,
either.
everything, yes.
That is
everything.
extraordinary. Now, that must have been a supercomputer that created that.
Yes, there were 2 cyber mainframe computers involved in the project, a total of 3 years and 4 man-years involved in achieving that animation.
Yeah. And the animation lasts about 5 minutes, but
Yes,
I would like
yes.
to say I think it's worth every moment of it.
Yes, I'll second that. The organisers say there's now a new category for students who don't have access to such expensive hardware, so go to it. Next week's show is a bit more down to earth. Ideas and information for the home computer buff. So, goodbye until then, and we'll leave you with a bit more of Tony DePeltry.